Thank you. I appreciate everybody's patience on that. We are going to reconvene, and I believe our city clerk has some comments she would like to make before we start the rest of the discussion.
Just wanted to mention a few things before you got deep into your discussions. The admin officers, Travis wasn't able to join us, so if I say anything that you don't agree with, please let me know. But we met yesterday to try to work through where we could find some savings in our budget so that we could help support these contributions to the outside organizations. I think we're all in agreement that we see real value in these organizations and feel that, as I think Mr. Morris pointed out the other day, that I would consider them to be strategic partners. And, when you say outside organizations, it makes it sound like there's not a real connection between us, but there absolutely is. And cutting these organizations will do significant harm to the city, to us as administrative officers, to the internal organization. So because we feel that way, we went through and identified some places that we felt, would not be detrimental to the city. I mean, one of the savings we found was easy enough to contact the American Legal Services, saving $22,000 by just not updating the code books that council has. It's all available online. So there's $22,000 saved there, but some of the other suggestions that we had were reducing the demolition budget. As many of you are aware, we've allocated $50,000, but we have made tremendous progress in that front over the last few years, taking down a number of buildings. And given the legal challenges that come along with that, the timeline that it takes to work through that process, internally, we would feel comfortable with reducing that budget because we think that there's fewer and fewer properties that are going to necessitate using those types of funds.
Can I interject there for one second, please? Along those lines, I absolutely agree with you, Jessica. And from my meetings last week in D.C., there's a ton of money out there that we can go after to try to go after these properties and either rehabilitate them or demolish them. So, I mean, there's other pots of funding that we can possibly go out to use. We have the West Virginia Municipal League is going to be visiting Elkins next Tuesday to meet with me, so we're going to sit down. I'm going to meet with all the admin officers to talk about our priorities and our capital projects going forward to try to address some of these pots of money. So we do have that in our corner right now.
May I add one thing that I just found out about today? So last year there was a bill passed with regard to abandoned, dilapidated properties. No funding for it, however. This legislative session took $10 million of the surplus funds the state had to put into that program, and the DEP is looking at it, and they're going to be making that $10 million available. So that's going to be something within this next year that's going to happen. That will be another thing that the city could look to for any funds with regard to the abandoned and dilapidated property. So that's just was reported in the Gazette. I guess it got passed right at the very end, and the $10 million now is funding that budget.
Thank you. Back to you, Jessica. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. The other thing that we talked about was a reduction in the beautification budget. When in discussions of the coal severance budget, there's $159,000 available there. That money in the past has been used towards the fire department, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it used to, would build up that fund in an effort to then have monies available when they had a need for the purchase of a new truck or some piece of equipment. With the fire fees being in place, that's not as necessary, not as needed, and so those funds have actually been kind of taken away from the fire department and are now just kind of sitting, waiting. They don't have a designated use. So it would be our suggestion that you look at those coal severance funds to contract out the improvements to the downtown streetscape, parking in particular. We did the test block. It's been really, really difficult for the street department to be able to set aside time to work on that project. So for several years, we've talked about the option of contracting that work out. And I think that may be a good option to look at and use the money to reduce the beautification, leaving in there the monies that are for contracted services for the flowers, for the flower baskets, and also for the landscaping of City Hall. parking lot. And I think in this proposed budget that I emailed yesterday, we also left a little bit in there just for some flexibility if anything came up where we needed to use those funds, but taking out the money and for the implementing the parking downtown and other beautification things related to the Main Street streetscape and taking that from Cole Severance. The other thing I think to think about in that regard is it's going to be a big expense up front. If you go through and do all this parking throughout downtown, if you purchase additional furnishings, Cole Severance generates about $12,000 annually. If you use that money for this larger expense up front, then you could use that annual income in the future or not, but just remember that that money will regenerate eventually. So those were some of the things that we talked about and that were emailed out to council yesterday. I'll also note that not reflected in this spreadsheet, which I don't know, Tracy, if you want to make the adjustments, is the $200 savings under civic promotions because we reduced that budget, and also the $16,000 in savings from the street department with the reduction, as Mr. Sampson mentioned, in the wash bay, and also the $3,000 reduction in tools. That totals, just the savings that we were able to find in our budgets totals just over $41,000. The proposed budget I sent out yesterday also reduced the amount of the carryover by $4,300. Now, these additional reductions of $19,000, if you added those in, you'd reduce the carryover potentially even more. And I think happy to answer any questions about any of our discussions that we had or anything we included in the budget that was sent out.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong. As I understand it, you reestablished all of the outside contributions to their, not what they requested this year, but to what they were given last year.
Yes, thank you. I forgot to mention that. That's exactly what we did to the contributions that were given in fiscal year 22. Those were completely restored, plus an additional 4,300. Now, 23,000 would be. You could reduce the carryover amount by that much.
Okay, that being said, I would agree with all of that, except for the line item for American Forest Heritage. And I think that we need to zero that one out. I'm in support of all the rest of the restoration of the outside contributions, but that's the only one that I would have some issue with. Other than that, I appreciate the work that you all have done. I think this session today has been extremely beneficial to all of us. And I thank you, Tracy, and thank the other admin officers for that. So that's where I am right now. Thank you.
If I can just add just one other thing about carryover monies. I understand the need to keep those in financial stabilization, but I will tell you, the city has been very solid for years, and I implore you to remember that that is taxpayer funds, and in a case of potentially needing and addressing funds, as we've had to take monies out of that to take care of some things, I am comfortable with coming down to $500,000 in it because I feel 100% confident that in the case of some type of catastrophe, that we would be able to get a loan to do that. I'm not asking to wipe it out, but we can easily do more services for the citizens. So that's just my response to that.
Can I make one quick comment? Just that the removal, and I'm not sure, but when state code says that you can only have up to 30% of general funds in your financial stabilization account. With the fire department and being removed, and we've calculated that in the past, has the sanitation budget been included in that calculation?
Not sanitation, no.
Okay, so if you're removing the fire department funds, does that
Correct.
reduce the amount that we can have in financial stabilization?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And then it'll go from about 1.8 down to 1.6 with the removal of the fire department funds. And I think there's about 1.2 in there now?
There'll be approximately 1.2 after that 200,000 comes out for the paving this year. So I
just said, just for clarification, so with the carryover, where are we at now? How much will be,
Well, I think first thing, I need direction on what Jessica just presented. Do you want to put, does council want to put the
amounts
outside
back.
contributions back? So I can start plugging numbers in.
I'm definitely in favor of that. And I would like to publicly apologize to all those who have had a very rough week, thinking that we were all on board with seeing that reduction to our so-called outside agencies. Many of us, probably all of us, were very disappointed in those figures and felt strongly that all those agencies had to be refunded and brought back to their levels. I'm sad that there was not an article in the Intermountain explaining all the comments that came up at the last council meeting, in which we expressed our concern and expressed our ideas of possible funding sources, including the use of the coal severance tax. We were all very, very optimistic that we would be able to refund the budget lines to the outside agencies. And one of the things I think going forward, this was an extraordinary year, but having this process of being able to go through line by line and all the administrative officers coming together, please know that that's where our heart is, that we truly support all the work that everybody has done and truly want to keep this an awesome community.
If I can kind of follow up with that, the admin officers spend months on looking at all of the budgets. So what we present to you is what we need to run our departments. And so with what happened at the council meeting, it just kind of showed what the leftover amount was. I understand that this is good. The admin officers have talked about kind of restructuring how we do the process from January to March, and Jessica will bring more forward about that, if not today, in weeks or months to come. Process is
today.
definitely, yeah, not today, but the process is definitely going to change. There are several reasons why we were behind the gun that I don't care to discuss right now. But by no means was it a slap to the outside contributions or the outside organizations, other than that's where it left us once we had our budgets. And as I said in council last week, we're in a very trying year. Costs are going through the roof. Fuel is going through the roof. I think we've budgeted very conservatively, and if things continue to go up, there's going to have to be some decisions made in the next budget year. Thank you.
I would like to just add to what Nancy has said already, and reiterate what she has said and agree with that, but also to the public, which I don't see the newspaper here anymore. They're still here? No way. Anyway.
No, they often watch it online, though, so they
Okay,
track
well,
us.
if you're watching, that'd be great. But it is responsibility, not only of this body, but of the community and the state at large, to take a look at what your West Virginia legislature is doing, because they are absolutely destroying municipalities. If that's what you want, then you'll vote for them again. But if that's not what you want, please, please be educated and educate yourself about what your legislature is doing to the state of West Virginia. Thank you.
Very well said, because they are crippling us right now.
If I may, I'd like to go back to Councilor Friddle's comment. It was my understanding, in looking at this budget for our partner organizations, that AFHA $6,000 had to do with an AmeriCorps position that no longer is there.
That's not true. We have a
What
current,
is it?
we currently have an AmeriCorps. That's
AFHA?
Yeah, AFNHA, yes. It works for the tree board right now. It has done an amazing amount of work in the city to, for all kinds of things. I'll be happy to share with you. But also, I mean, next year, this tree board may not get to use that funds, but maybe the parks wants that money and for that position. Or maybe Jessica would want that. So it's not necessarily just for tree board or whatever, but it can be used and utilized. It's a small amount of money that can be used to support an agency or a group or the city itself. So I just want you to think straight about that before you just take it out. So
I think in addition to the tree board, that money, it's stayed the same for several years now, is also, we used to have access to the hands-on team. They did a lot of work in City Hall. When the pandemic started, they weren't available. They weren't doing that type of work. But I have had conversations with Logan Smith recently about there are other hours available to the city, and he's trying to formulate exactly what that's going to look like, and it could be used in partnership with other organizations. It still has to fall within the mission, but I think that 6,000 is more than just supporting the tree board position.
okay, thank you.
Just to make a comment, and however council decides, I'm okay with, but that money was originally allocated to provide the match funding for that hotshot team or hands-on team. And then when that team went away, that's when the money got shifted over to use in other ways. Now, if we're gonna use it that way, I think we should designate it that way. So that's just my thought, so whatever. But I think we've really reached to the point where I think we have an agreement here. And that being said, Mr. Mayor, would you entertain a motion?
I absolutely would entertain a motion.
I think can you make the adjustments first? I'm sorry, I'm a little just to make sure.
So are we okay with fully funding all the organizations so I can make those adjustments?
Yes.
To last year's numbers, correct?
Yes, sir.
And as Tracy's making these adjustments, I just want to say I appreciate everybody's efforts on this. I mean, the admin officers have really, really worked hard, extremely hard. I appreciate council doing their due diligence on this, but this may be a sign of the times for the next couple of years that the budget's going to be tight. I mean, we're going to have some tough times ahead, so we have tough decisions, and we have to remember, as our attorney says, we provide a lot of services, and we have to take care of our workers as well. And I stated earlier, 25% of our workforce has been here a year or less. If we don't have competitive wages, they're not going to stay. So we have to make sure that we can pick up the trash, that we can have water, we have sewer, that we can pave the roads, as Josh said. We have to make sure we can provide those services, that Tracy has the ability to process the bills. So we can't ignore our internal work family either.
I totally agree with you on that.
So I just want to confirm, we are leaving Appalachian Forest Heritage at what they had last year, correct? Thank you. Okay. So now that puts us with the difference of 351,054.
Did you make the reduction in demolition and beautification?
So we're going, I just thought we were doing outside contribution.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. I don't mean to jump ahead.
No,
Okay.
that's okay.
Is the motion to accept the,
We don't actually have a motion yet. We're making recommendations right now.
I would make a recommendation that we include, I guess, the adjustments made by the administrative officers in their proposal submitted earlier in the week. If everyone's okay with that.
I would like to make a suggestion of bringing demolition down to 0. In light of the potential funding that we have out there, I would make that recommendation.
I would feel comfortable with that, Tracy, to be honest with you.
Counselor.
And let me just mention something, the current money in this fiscal year is, it appears is going to be sufficient to deal with the properties that are the most critical. The top three. And frankly, Mr. Eisner and I had a recent conversation. We're really down to just a few properties at this point, as several people have indicated. So, you know, and with this sourcing, you know, there's an opportunity, even if you want to demo other properties, that perhaps getting that available. I mean, how many years have you put, has the council put 50,000? Is this the third or fourth year?
This would be the third year. The first year we started, we expended $24,350. The second year, we did $80,201. This current year, we've only spent out of the 50, 42, 56, but we know we have the 3 properties
Right.
that are scheduled yet, and then the budgeted amount. So is everybody okay with bringing it down to 0?
Yeah.
Are there there's probably wouldn't be any fees or anything that we would need to have up front? Do we?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
I mean, you know, sometimes you need some cash in order to initiate projects or whatever.
Well,
I think there's plenty of funding out there we could go after, Ms. Maryland, to be honest with you, that
Okay.
I would feel comfortable zeroing
Okay.
that out.
And then the streetscape. Get down to that. So we were reducing that down to 45, is that right, Jessica? But do we want to reduce that?
Reduce
Hang
it
on.
by less since we're
Well,
pushing the
if,
demolition.
yeah, I think we should leave a little money in there,
Yeah.
just in case something crops up. But I think with what Jessica mentioned, if we want to do the parking, we could take that out of coal severance if you all would like. So I would recommend potentially leaving 5,000 or 10,000 in that line item for beautification.
Well, we were at 50.
That's correct.
And the recommendation was reducing that to 40. That seems, should we bump that back up a little bit? So reducing it by 30?
That doesn't cover the flowers. The flowers are separate. Is that what you were?
The flowers and the watering,
And the parking
and the
lot.
parking are all up under the contracted services. So the supplies and materials were just for streetscape only. So, correct me if I'm wrong, Jessica, I'm thinking put 5,000 or 10,000 in there.
I think 5 would probably be sufficient.
Okay.
If the intention is to contract that out to someone else, then the bulk of that money would then come from the coal severance, if that's
Correct.
what you all want to do. I don't know what we would need to pull from that account if most of that is being contracted out.
I don't know what is on the wish list for downtown street furnishings. I know, we've gotten most of the benches and, hopefully we'll get all the tree grates in with this budget, this fiscal year budget. Spike ball, I don't know what else is on their potential risks?
Well, you can either leave money in here for those types of things, or those also could be taken from coal severance. If you're talking about benches and bike bollards and wayfinding signs and things like that, they could be, as I said, you could leave money here for that, or you can take that out of coal severance.
I mean, will it become confusing, though? You know, when it's not listed as such? I mean, do you know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying, and I agree. I think probably needs to be a decision one way or the other,
think we
taking
should-
everything that has to do with the streetscape out of coal severance or leaving it here. Because when you start to separate things like that, then, you know.
I would leave it myself.
Leave it, what?
I would-
Full severance or in the streets?
In streetscape, so that it's clear, better understood where it's coming from. I don't know that we need 50, maybe you could reduce it by 10,
Well, you won't get contracted services. You will not get somebody to come in and do very much work at all for that small amount of money, if that's the intention, to try to contract that out.
So then can we say that the coal severance that's exactly what's being used for, then if we line it, take it out?
That's up to you all.
Jessica, what would you recommend the number be?
I would recommend it be maybe 5,000. I mean, and then take everything that has to do with the streetscape out of coal severance.
Okay.
So the 5,000, I'm sorry to ask this again. So the 5,000 would cover the 5,000 would cover the no.
No.
That's
Nope.
under contractual?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I think the 5,000 I would leave that in there for things that the city might identify outside of the streetscape plan that have to do with beautification.
Sounds good.
Hey, guys, I want to jump in here really quick. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm going to have to take off. Got to go to work. I really appreciate what we've done this session. I think restoring the funding to what I would call our, strategic partners or stakeholder organizations is a good thing to do. I think the prioritization of funds we owe it to them. But yeah, with that said, I'm going to have to take off. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Clint.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
May I ask a question, Tracy? If you take money out of coal severance for whatever, you explain what it's being used for, correct?
Absolutely.
I mean, so that if you take out whatever you're talking about, Nancy, that if there is some need and it comes out of coal severance, it's going to be shown as, you don't just take it out and don't say what it's used for, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And right now, we've generally just had it budgeted, because you have to budget the expenditures to have a balanced budget with the state. Have just put it kind of under City Hall, but if the intention is to use it for the streetscape plan, by all means, that will be discussed as well. So it'll be known.
I just don't know what $5,000 will buy you.
You can zero it out. I mean, if you want everything to come out of coal
I'd
severance.
like to leave it in there.
I just would make, the differentiation for me would be anything that you identify that you're purchasing or contracting that is in direct response to the proposed streetscape plan or the adopted streetscape plan. And then if I don't know what those other needs might be, well, you had mentioned if there's.
I think an example would be, let's say that we've had a couple hanging baskets throughout the summer that maybe broke and would need to be replaced before the fall flowers. To me, that's an additional expenditure that was not planned.
Or a matching grant of some sort, opportunity that might come up that could help fund.
Well, if you wouldn't pay that out, you could move it somewhere else, but you wouldn't pay that out of supplies and materials.
Like last year, we had a couple of the racks that were on the bridge get thrown into the river, actually.
That's correct.
That's an
Yes.
example, to
Yes, sir.
replace that.
But if 5,000 seems too excessive, you could, like I said, you can make that whatever amount.
I like to have that in there.
I was going to say, and keep in mind, that's what budget revisions are for.
Right. I recommend keeping the 5,000 there.
I would agree with that. I agree. I think we we zeroed out the grant match, didn't we? And I'm just concerned about, have we ever used that, or is that, what is that, what?
That money was originally put in there because we had discussed creating a grant matching program. And that was not done prior to the pandemic and was not done throughout the pandemic. So that money was never, the discussion was create this program to, if organizations had grant opportunities, they would bring those, we would set up a process and create sort of a checklist of things. You had to meet these certain criteria, and then the city would help you with matching funds. But like I said, that program was not created, and right now it doesn't feel like a good time to be doing that, so we just kind of have zeroed that out for now.
Okay, thank you.
So am I correct, we're in agreement of 5,000 into beautification for the streetscape?
Yes.
So that brings us down to $256,054 difference.
Sorry, can you tell me that amount one more time?
Sure, sorry, 256,054.
Thank you.
So that is approximately $45,000 to $50,000 less estimated for a carryover amount. I'm going to scroll clear back up to this again and show that we've had carryover amounts in the past. And truly, to not budget that, ideally it would be great not to budget that, but as you can see here, we'd have to cut out $250,000 somewhere from budgets if we don't.
Well, I think we should put it back in.
So does anybody, with that said, does anybody have any planned cuts anywhere else within the budget? Additions or any changes? If not, I'll put the carryover amount of the $256,054. Sorry, I know I'm probably making y'all dizzy with that, I'm sorry. Oops. See if I got that right. So that brings us to a balanced budget. Yay.
Balanced budget.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve the budget as presented.
I'd
Thank
second
you,
that.
Mr. Friddle. We have a motion. Any other comments or discussion today? If none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you guys so much. And with that, I will look for a motion to adjourn.
Sorry, before you adjourn, I'm sorry, I just remembered. I'd like for council to consider, we have to lay the levy, as we do every year in April. So instead of waiting until that first April meeting, I'd like to talk about that just really quickly today. Typically, what we've done in the past, we're required to meet on the third Tuesday of April. We've moved all the council business that would normally occur at the second meeting, which would be the third Thursday in April, and moved it all to that Tuesday and then canceled that so that we're not meeting twice in that week. Is that acceptable to everybody? So that would be Tuesday, the 19th. Just keep it at the regular time, 7?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And that replaces the third week, the third.
The third, yeah, the second meeting of the month in April. Yeah.
Any other alibis today? If none, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.